Daf 64 of Yevamot has all this crazy stuff on prayers and children. So we're in this whole section talking about pruvavu, the whole mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply. And yet, really, all of the forefathers had a hard time having children, and 3 of the 4 mothers had a hard time having children. And this whole question, like, why? What is going on with this thing? Why are they all having such a hard time? And it points out on the stuff, it says, you know what? Because God wants the prayers of the righteous. That crazy? It's like, wow, maybe it's not so good being righteous. If like you're going to have a harder time than everybody else for all your righteousness. Maybe it's not such a, you think there'd be rewards for being righteous, not that you're going to be like, punished for doing so by having to go through more difficulties. But it says God wants the prayers of the righteous. Therefore, the righteous are made to struggle in these ways that maybe some other people wouldn't have to struggle. And we even go on, we talk about how you have both Rivka and Yitzchak praying that they should be able to conceive and have children, and saying like Rivka is praying, and then Yitzchak prays, and then Yitzchak gets answered. It's like, well, what about Rivka? What about her prayers? And it goes on, it says this wild thing. It says that the prayers of a righteous person, the child of a righteous person, is more powerful than a righteous person, the child of a non-righteous person. I think, wait a second, that seems kind of messed up. It seems like if somebody grew up in a non-righteous household and managed to turn themselves around and like leave the path they were on and really rectify their lives, that's a big accomplishment. That sounds bigger than growing up in the house of a righteous person and just following in those ways. So I think so. Maybe, the righteous person, the child of a non-righteous person, their prayer should be higher. But we say that's not the way it works. And to a certain extent, we can understand it in terms of, well, with Yitzchak, Abraham also wanted his son and daughter-in-law to have a child. He wanted grandkids, right? So on the Yitzchak side, you had basically Yitzchak and Abraham's prayers going for this child. On the Rivka side, you just had Rivka's prayers, and her parents probably didn't really care all that much. It wasn't the same level of prayer. They probably weren't praying and didn't have the same level of devotion that Abraham had on the other side. So we kind of have like 2 righteous people stacked praying on one side and 1 righteous person stacked on the other side. Then it goes on to point out, and this is the last point that I'll make here, that the prayers of a righteous person, what are they? They get compared to a pitchfork. So even though the righteous are given some difficult circumstances oftentimes, because we're told that God wants the prayers of the righteous, we say the prayers of the righteous are like a pitchfork. Why like a pitchfork? Because the pitchfork has the power to overturn. So a prayer has the ability to overturn reality. In fact, it goes on to talk about how Sarah herself, it says, didn't even have a womb. She was born without a womb, and yet she was able to bear children because of the power of prayer.